creature like that, how would it ever die?
And this monster starts running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Oh, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. Horrible. Looked like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Hello again. Hello. Um, I'm sure you noticed that if you follow on Twitch, that this just went live twice in a row. My internet conveniently went out for just long enough for everything to go down, and I had to restart. So now we will. Now we're going to restart the episode. Oh, geez. This is my luck. Anyways, welcome in everybody to season 2, episode 24 of Beyond the Shadows podcast. My name is Victus, and I'm your intrepid paranormal investigator and host. And this week we are discussing the Witch. So before I get too far, I want to say, give a big shout out to you, the listeners and viewers, those of you watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. And if you're watching and you haven't hit the subscribe button, I know that y'all hate hearing this part, but this podcast does not make money. So if you hit that subscribe button, it only helps. We're just trying to maximize our exposure. So if you're watching on YouTube, especially on the live stuff, restream during the week, hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. It would help our analytic information. But other than that, thank you so much for everybody that has subscribed. This week, we cracked 200 subscribers on YouTube, everybody. Yes, that's right. That's right. We cracked 200. So we're up to 201 subscribers on YouTube. We're at 155 on Twitch. So, if you're watching on YouTube, we are live every Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Except for this evening, where we're a little bit behind because my internet went out, and now we're a half hour behind. But we will make do. We will make this happen all the same. I had a fancy intro, and I had it typed up, and I literally closed the window, didn't save it. So now I don't have my fancy intro any longer. But you've got me, and I can make stuff up on the fly. But this week we are covering the Bell Witch. It's a really interesting story. It covered. It's a little spookier than I thought. I'd heard the title of the Bell Witch a long time ago, but I wasn't 100% sure what it was until I started doing the research for this week's episode. But I think we're gonna enjoy this one. I'm gonna do my best to really ramp up the audios this week and get some more interactive sounds happening. Man, I had a good couple jokes right at the beginning last time. Jeez, got 15 whole minutes in and the stream dropped. I'm so fortunate. That's just the way it goes, I guess. But Aeon and Paul are still being held captive in the underground bunker beneath Area 51. I have heard nothing from them this week, so I guess no news is good news. I will bring more information to you when it becomes more readily available to me. That being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into one of my favorite segments. And y'all know that this is one of my favorite segments. That's why we continue to do it every week. I've got a special one for you this week. You ready for this? What shirt are you wearing today? So this week I've got a very special shirt. This one hasn't been seen since season one. The rotation's coming back around, so you're starting to see some reruns here, but still, so a very good shirt nonetheless. This was an early Christmas present from my wonderful wife this last year. Um, Shout out to all my Goofy movie fans out there. I'm a big fan of Goofy movie. That was my joint growing up. That was my stuff. I've seen the movie so many times I could quote it to your front and back. Uh, I will not quote the movie front to back this very evening, but I will show you the shirt. Check this out. This is my Powerline Standout World Tour T-shirt, and then the back has the cities and dates from the World Tour. So cool. I'm sure my Goofy movie fans out there would appreciate this. Very cool shirt. This is a legit official Disney production shirt, and it cost a tremendous amount of money, but it is one of my very favorites, and I try not to wear it too much because I want it to last longer than normal. So, also, so this is something I brought up before my internet went out, but it's practically a drinking game at this point. I didn't realize how much I said so. As my transition, my segue from one segment to the next, I lack I lack the words to transition smoothly and efficiently. I am not a professional speaker. I do this for the love of the game. And I have a bad habit of pausing and going, so, and I didn't realize it until this week. My TV was running downstairs for the weekly rebroadcast that I stream on YouTube, and I didn't realize, my dog sits and watches this TV when we're not home, and I didn't realize how often I said so until I I spent some time downstairs doing some chores this weekend. I was like, oh my gosh, I say it so much. It would make a fantastic drinking game. Not saying go out and start drinking or stuff, you know what I mean? But if you are curled up this evening with a drink in your hand, take a drink every time I say so. Have fun with that. I'll take a drink to that. But we are on season 2, episode 24, Beyond the Shadows podcast. I am your intrepid paranormal investigator and host, Victus, and this evening we are covering The Bell Witch. So we're going to get straight into it. I think everything's up and running. It seems, I gave it, we've been live for about 9 minutes now, and it seems like my internet is stable, so we're going to go with it. Here we go. Fingers crossed we don't go down again. And if we do, I will just record and you will get this episode later uploaded on Tuesday at midnight. So, nope, there you go. Yep, I said it. Without further ado, The Bell Witch. Adams, Tennessee. Winter, 1817. The fire had long burned down to embers in the Bell family hearth, casting faint orange glows across the rough wooden walls. Outside, the wind hissed like a dying whisper through the leafless trees. Inside the house, Betsy Bell lay curled beneath layers of quilts, clutching them to her neck in hopes that the thing outside her door wouldn't come back tonight. It was quiet for a moment. Then came the soft, slow dragging sound just outside her bedroom door. Again. She didn't breathe. Then something moved just beyond the wooden frame. Then stopped. Her ears strained in the dark. And then it came. A breath, almost a whisper. rasped out from nowhere and everywhere at once. Betsy. The door creaked open, but no one was there. The shadow seemed to breathe, the air was cold, and then slap! A sharp strike crashed across her face. Her bed jerked violently as something unseen gripped it. She screamed. Her brothers rushed in, but they were too late. All they could do was hold her down as the room erupted with chilling laughter, a voice disembodied and triumphant. It was just the beginning. Tonight, we travel back more than 200 years to a quiet corner of Tennessee where one of the most horrifying hauntings in American history took place, known as the Bell Witch. This case blends fact, folklore, and first-hand accounts into a story of psychological terror, unexplained phenomena, and even death. It's a tale that frightened an entire community and, according to legend, shook a future U.S. president to his core. When the Bell family first moved to Adams, Tennessee in the early 1800s, they had no idea what they were stepping onto. They had no idea they were stepping onto a land that would become the epicenter of a legendary haunting. John Bell Sr., a respected farmer and devout Christian, moved his wife Lucy and their children from North Carolina around 1804, purchasing over 300 acres of fertile farmland in Robertson County. It was an ideal place to raise a family, peaceful, isolated, and full of promise. For over a decade, things were quiet. John Bell built a successful plantation. The family attended church. They employed several enslaved individuals who worked their land. Their children, including young Betsy Bell, grew up surrounded by nature, helping with farm chores and learning scripture. There was nothing unusual until late in the summer of 1817. That's when John Bell encountered something strange in his cornfield. A creature unlike anything he'd seen before. It had the body of a dog, the head of a rabbit. He aimed his rifle at it and fired. But the animal vanished into thin air. He didn't tell many people about the incident at first, but that night, knocking sounds began on the walls of the house. At first it was subtle. Knocks here and there, too regular to be wind, too directional to ignore. The family searched outside thinking it was a prank, but found nothing. The sounds grew louder over the next few days. Heavy thuds against the wall, the sound of dragging across the floorboards. Then the knocking moved indoors. Chairs shifted on their own, silverware rattled, doors opened and closed with no breeze to blame. Footsteps creaked across the floors. And in the dead of night, even when every member of the family was accounted for, Betsy was the first to hear the whispering. Not from the other room, but from within the walls. She began waking with scratches on her arms, then bruises. One morning, her face bore the red imprint of a hand, one no one had seen. The attacks became more violent as the days passed. The family would sit together at night, praying aloud as Betsy was slapped, pinched, and thrown from her bed by an invisible force. Lucy Bell tried to remain calm. She was a woman of strong faith, and she insisted they must be being tested by God. But John Bell was less sure. He consulted their pastor. They prayed together. They even attempted rudimentary exorcisms, read scripture aloud through the house. But the spirit only grew bolder. Then it began to speak. At first, it mimicked family members' voices. Then it began singing hymns. Eventually, it began holding conversations. It knew scripture, debated theology, and even insulted preachers who visited the property. When asked who it was, it gave different answers, but one name kept returning. Kate. The voice was Kate Batts, witch. A reference to a local woman who had once accused John Bell of cheating her in a land deal. Batts was known in town as an eccentric, outspoken, and perhaps a little unhinged. People whispered about her even before the hauntings began, but was she really behind it? That question would haunt the Bells and the town for years. What made the Bell Witch unique wasn't just the violence, but the intelligence. It wasn't a mindless haunting. This entity could hold grudges. It revealed secrets about neighbors, predicted events that would later come true, and responded directly to challenges from skeptics. Once a visitor came and insisted it was all a hoax. The spirit waited until he was asleep and screamed in his ear until he bolted from the house. Another time it recited a sermon word for word that had been given dozens of miles away, proving it could travel or see beyond the home. Betsy Bell, however, bore the brunt of the haunting. She was 12 when it began, and the physical abuse nearly broke her. Once her bright personality dimmed, she stopped playing with friends. She rarely left her room, and she flinched when people got too close. The voice wouldn't let her be, not at school, not in church, not even in her dreams. It tormented her with shrieks, growls, and threats. It called her names and pinched her in front of others. As the months passed, Betsy became the center of town gossip. Was she possessed? Mentally ill? Some whispered she was inventing it all. Others were convinced that she was cursed. The situation grew more complicated when she fell in love. Betsy became engaged to a local boy by the name of Joshua Gardner, a kind, educated young man who offered her hope of a normal life. But as soon as the relationship began, the attacks intensified. Every time they met, the voice would shriek, throw things, or assault Betsy in her sleep. The spirit screamed, quote, "Do not marry Joshua," end quote, until Betsy finally broke off the engagement in despair. And still, the entity wasn't satisfied. John Bell, the patriarch, began showing signs of strange illness. His tongue would swell unexpectedly, rendering him mute. He'd fall to the ground with no explanation. Doctors couldn't diagnose him. And all the while, the spirit would laugh and whisper, "John Bell is mine." Even when guests were present, the haunting didn't relent. People came from miles around to witness it. Clergy, skeptics, and curious neighbors alike. Some claimed to hear the voice speak to them directly. Others were slapped, had their clothes tugged, or felt an air grow icy cold. The Bell home became a terrifying attraction, and the story of Kate the Witch spread far beyond Tennessee. Word eventually reached the East Coast, then Washington. And that's when President Andrew Jackson got involved. All right. So out the gate, we're looking at some pretty standard. We're looking at some pretty standard uh, poltergeist activity here. We're checking all the boxes. We've got knocking. We have disembodied voices. We have physical attacks. Another thing, and this is a little more catered to like demonic stuff, but we also have unexplained illnesses. So that is, like I said, we talked a little bit about it last week with the possession, the exorcism of Annalise Michelle. Unexplained illnesses is a nice hallmark of demonic activity. However, not all of these things check the boxes for demonic activity. We're looking at early 1800s in the United States. We were still dealing with witch hunts back then. So, long story short, there was a woman in town who was a little eccentric, and she died. It doesn't say precisely how she died, but the social norm back then was you were a Christian, you did precisely what you needed, you didn't squabble, you didn't argue, and if you did anything outside of those norms, you would become labeled as a witch. It was so easy to do, it happened all the time, and this is one of those cases where it did happen. Let me see if I can find precisely how Kate the Bell Witch died. So I'm not seeing anything directly. Um, huh. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything directly saying how Kate Batts died. So it makes you wonder. Oh no, I'm sorry. I flubbed that. I flubbed that. I'm sorry. Yeah, Kate Batts was not dead at this point. She was still alive. This is the thing we're dealing with. Okay, so we have a woman who was done wrong by John Bell, and he the story goes that she was cheated out of some land by John Bell, and that this disembodied voice identifies itself as Kate the witch, and at this time they believed that this voice was the voice of Kate Batts. So, just a small recap. We're going to get back into it. The Bell family's torment, once a local curiosity whispered about in churches and town squares, began to attract attention from far beyond the borders of Robertson County. By 1818, the strange phenomena had continued for nearly a year, but as far from fading, it had only escalated. The voice, still identifying itself at times as Kate, became louder and more confident, more articulate. It no longer confined itself to mere mockery or slaps in the dark. It now sang hymns in Latin, quoted passages from the Bible that none of the Bells had ever read aloud, and repeated conversations that had occurred in secret miles away from the farm. At night, it would chant verses, sometimes in tongues. During the day, it played games of deception and psychological cruelty. Objects vanished and reappeared in impossible places. Firewood stacked neatly by the hearth would tumble apart at the moment somebody entered the room. Meals prepared by Lucy Bell were flung from the table before anyone could take a bite. And then there were the visitors. Words of the haunting had spread. Ministers came, physicians, skeptics, neighbors, all hoping to glimpse the infamous Bell Witch for themselves. Some arrived with Bibles, others with specific instruments or scientific instruments, and all left changed. One clergyman, Reverend James Gunn, entered the house scoffing at the family's fears. That night he was shaken from sleep by the sound of his own voice repeating private sins he had confessed only to God. His bed levitated, then dropped with a bone-jarring thud. The next morning he fled the Bell property and never returned. Okay, so we're checking one more box for demonic entities here. Knowledge of things unknown. So, case in point here, a reverend said his sins at confession, and Kate the Witch knew them and spoke them aloud inside this house. And then, of course, we're dealing with things being thrown around the house too. So let's also check in the box for demonic. We're checking a lot of boxes here for demonic possession. Even though those who didn't witness full-blown manifestations often heard the voice. It would greet them by name, reveal their secrets, or mock their intentions. Some guests received polite welcomes, while others were insulted or worse, scratched or slapped, or struck by unseen hands. The Bell household had become a haunted theater, and its performances were anything but predictable. One of the most enduring legends of the Bell Witch case involves none other than General Andrew Jackson, the future president of the United States. The year was 1819. At the time, Jackson was a war hero, known for his exploits in the War of 1812 and his ruthless military campaigns in the South. Curious about the rumors, Jackson allegedly assembled a small party and set out for the Bell farm. With him were several men, some soldiers, some skeptics, but each were eager to see whether the tale of Kate the Witch held any truth. As the story goes, the group's wagon approached the Bell property just after nightfall. Suddenly, the wheels locked in place and the horses reared back, refusing to move. The men inspected the wheels and axles and terrain, but nothing was wrong, yet the wagon would not budge. Then, in a high female voice, it echoed out from the darkness. Quote, "All right, General, you may proceed." The wheels unlocked. Jackson reportedly turned to one of his companions and said, quote, "By the Eternal, I'd rather face the entire British Army than spend another night with that witch." End quote. Some accounts say that Jackson and his men spent the night only to be terrorized by slapping sounds, cold spots, and mysterious voices. One man had boasted of being a, quote, witch tamer, screamed in the darkness, and was seen fleeing by dawn. Jackson and his party left quietly and quickly and refused to speak any further about the experience. However, whether Jackson actually visited the farm is still hotly debated to this day. There is no official record, but oral histories passed down through generations and Adams insist that the tale was true. What matters more, perhaps, is how seriously people were beginning to take the haunting. The Bell Witch had gone from rural ghost story to a matter of national interest. And still, the entity remained strongest within the Bell home. By 1820, the Bell family had suffered years of mental and physical anguish. Betsy Bell was no longer the cheerful, imaginative girl she once was. Her health had declined, her engagement had been shattered. Friends had drifted away, fearful of the strange occurrences. Every night she waited for the slaps, the bruises, the voice that hissed her name from the shadows. Lucy Bell, ever the stoic mother, continued to run the household as best she could. Though the witch rarely targeted her directly, Lucy was not spared the grief of watching her family unravel. She believed the spirit had a purpose, divine or otherwise, but was powerless to stop it. John Bell, however, had become the focal point of Kate's wrath. His condition worsened rapidly. Episodes of paralysis became frequent. His mouth would swell without warning, rendering him speechless and choking. His once powerful frame withered, his eyes became sunken and haunted. The spirit often declared, quote, "Old Jack Bell is mine. He'll never leave this land alive." Those in town began to wonder aloud if Bell had made some kind of unholy pact, or if he was being punished for his past sins. After all, wasn't it curious that the spirit first identified itself as connected to a woman he had wronged in a land dispute? Kate, for her part, provided no clear answers, only riddles, contradictions, and cruel laughter. Some nights the spirits would praise Lucy, calling her the finest Christian woman in the region. Then it would shriek curses at John or torment Betsy for hours. There was no pattern, no end, no escape. By now, the haunting had taken on a life of its own outside the Bell property. People from other parts of Tennessee, even neighboring states, began reporting odd events after visiting the Bell home. Some claimed the spirit followed them, whispering their names at night. Others saw ghostly figures in their mirrors or heard phantom knocks on their walls. Bell Witch legend had become mobile, viral in its own 19th century way. Newspapers picked up the story. Ministers debated it in sermons. Some described it as a manifestation of demonic activity. Others called it a hoax, fabricated by the Bells for attention. Yet the physical evidence, witness accounts, scratches, bruises, and the sheer number of credible observers was hard to deny. One traveling preacher who came to debunk the story ended up staying in the Adams home for a month, convinced he was witnessing, quote, the most intelligent spiritual force ever recorded. But perhaps the most chilling part of the Bell Witch's evolution was its ability to anticipate. It would describe visitors before they arrived. It knew what was in their pockets. It spoke of their pasts and occasionally their futures. One guest, skeptical from the start, asked the spirit to tell him what had happened to a valuable heirloom in his family that they had lost years ago. Kate answered without hesitation, "It's buried beneath the old oak in your father's field." When the man returned home and dug in the described location, he found it exactly where she had said. This wasn't just a ghost. This was something else entirely. As strange as it may sound, not all of Kate's actions were malevolent. Some witnesses claimed the spirit comforted them, or even saved them from danger. It would sing lullabies to Lucy when she was ill. It warned neighbors of accidents that never happened because they had been avoided thanks to its intervention. But these moments of grace only deepened the mystery. Was this a single spirit or multiple? Was Kate an angry ghost or something masquerading as one? Was she once human, or was she something older, darker, unknowable? When pressed, the voice would deflect. Sometimes it said it was the ghost of an Indian. Other times it claimed to be the spirit of someone buried on the property. And once it said chillingly, quote, I am the spirit of someone buried in the woods by the riverbank. Someone murdered long ago, and I will not be quiet until the truth is known. The entity never shown its form, only its will. And for the Bell family, it seemed that will was destruction. By late 1820, John Bell's condition had deteriorated beyond recovery. He could no longer speak clearly. His body trembled. He suffered from convulsions. And on December 19th, he slipped into a coma and never woke up. The following day, he was dead. When the family found his medicine cabinet, a strange vial was discovered among the usual tonics and herbal mixtures. No one knew where it had come from. The liquid inside was dark and foul-smelling. When a small amount was given to the family's cat, the animal died instantly. The voice rang out triumphant, I gave old Jack that medicine. He's gone, and I fixed him. John Bell was buried in the family plot just beyond the homestead. Over 300 mourners attended the funeral. And as they stood in silence, the voice returned, mocking the dead, singing drinking songs and laughing from somewhere no one could find. Even in death, there was no peace. The Bell Witch had won. John Bell's funeral should have marked an ending. It was the largest gathering in Robertson County's brief history. Over 300 people came to pay their respects, farmers, clergymen, neighbors. Some arrived quietly, heads bowed in mourning. Others came just to say that they had been there, to see the family who endured the most famous haunting in American history, to gaze upon the grave of the man the witch had claimed as her own. The sky was gray. Wind rolled across the field like the breath through a coffin lid. And as the minister spoke his final words, a sound rose from somewhere beyond the trees. Singing. Not mournful, not reverent. It was loud, mocking, drunken. The disembodied voice of Kate erupted into a sea shanty, laughing between verses. The congregation stood frozen. Some fled. Others stood in horrified silence as the invisible spirit turned the solemn funeral into a cruel spectacle. And just as quickly as it began, it ended. Kate had gotten the last word. But the Bell Witch's haunting was not over. All right. We're really checking boxes here for demonic possession. But it's a little unusual. We are seeing the disembodied voice outside of the home, which is very unusual. It's very unusual for any kind of haunting. As far as I know, this is the only occurrence I've ever heard of where the ghost left the house and mocked the funeral of the person it was haunting. It definitely feels in the mindset of something in the early 1800s. It feels like a witch. This really checks that box for a witch. However, I don't know. I feel like if there were 300 people at this funeral, a few of them would have wanted to walk out into the forest and see where the voice was coming from, right? Am I overthinking that too much? I mean, if I were there, I would want to search the area, right? Maybe most of these people were, maybe most of these people were afraid. Oh, look at that. We lost a follower. Hey, all right. Good deal. Um, Sweet. We're down to 154 followers on Twitch. Amazing. Thank you, person who left. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. But yeah, it seems like it's very strange that nobody would want to go out into the forest and see where the voice was coming from, or at least look. Right, 300 people there. Somebody had to have looked. In the months following John Bell's death, the spirit's activity began to decline, but it did not vanish entirely. It no longer plagued the family nightly, but its presence was still felt. Whispers in the dark, cold drafts through sealed windows, unseen hands brushing past one's face. Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter, perhaps the entity's most frequent target, remained broken. She continued to experience nightmares, fits of anxiety, and an overwhelming sense of dread. She still heard the voice. Joshua Gardner, the man she had once loved, tried to rekindle their relationship, but Betsy refused. The trauma was too deep. The witch's influence lingered over every thought, every moment, every hope. Eventually, Betsy married a school teacher named Richard Powell, a man much older, quiet, and deeply interested in the supernatural. Powell had witnessed the haunting firsthand as a friend of the family and later became a vocal chronicler of the events. To some, his interest bordered on obsession. He claimed that whatever the Bell Witch was, it had intelligence beyond human understanding. Whether by marriage or exhaustion, the spirit seemed to loosen its grip on Betsy after that. But she was never the same. Her life became one of quiet withdrawal. Through the years she lived into old age, she never again spoke publicly about what happened during those years. Others in the family tried to move on. Lucy Bell focused on the children. The remaining sons managed the property, keeping their heads down, trying not to provoke whatever might still linger. And for a time, things were quiet. And then in one final act of manipulation, the Bell Witch left them a warning. She told the family she would return in exactly 107 years, not to haunt, but to reveal something. What that something was, she didn't say. She claimed her business was not finished, that the land still held secrets, that the Bell name would echo again. Then, she was gone. By 1821, the voices ceased entirely. No more slaps, no more laughter. The air in the house returned to normal. Neighbors breathed easier, and Betsy stopped flinching in the night. But no one ever forgot. So, oh, there it is. Yep, take a drink. I need a better segue than so. I say it a lot. Jeez. I don't know which way I'm leaning on this story so far. We're about half through. It feels like a normal poltergeist thing, but then it also feels like demonic, something demonic there. we did deal with something earlier in, I think it was season 2, not the Enfield poltergeist. Well, partially the Enfield poltergeist. Let me look it up right quick. I should have just a list of all these episodes here in front of me so I can see what they are, but I don't. Oh, geez. Let's see. Okay, maybe it wasn't season 2. Maybe it was towards the end of season 1. Come on. Where is it? Geez, I don't even see the Enfield poltergeist. Let's see. Let's go back to beginning of season 1. The Thornton Heath poltergeist. Yeah, so we're looking at uh, something that was in the Thornton Heath poltergeist and the Enfield poltergeist. Um, Statistically speaking, we see more demonic and poltergeist activity when it comes to younger, like teenage, preteen girls, and geez, what did they call it? PTK, psychotelekinesis, or psychic teenage kinesis, something like that, where they talk about how the young adolescent mind of a girl can at times manifest itself in ways that make you think that it's a poltergeist. And this happens. This is a very common thing. That let's say we have a house with husband and wife, a young daughter, and a middle-aged boy. They start having poltergeist-like activity. So they remove the children from the home, and the activity seems to stop. And you see a little bit of it at the place where the children go to, but more specifically, it seems to follow the girl. Uh, at first, people thought that it was like an entity latched onto the girl, but there's been studies all throughout. You know, Ed and Lorraine Warren famously studied the Enfield poltergeist, and they worked with the Society for Psychical Research and came up with this new idea that it was manifested psychokinesis or telekinesis from the young girl in the family, that the girl unknowingly was manifesting these things happening. And it did mimic, like poltergeist and demonic activity. So I see we do have a parallel here, that the young girl seems to be the target. And I don't know, it does seem very specific though, right? Because we're dealing with, the voices talking not explicitly to just a girl or just manifesting things around the girl. It seems like it's happening to the whole family. However, it's leaving the mother alone, which kind of feels like something a little girl would do, right? Maybe, and I'm just reading between the lines here. That's what I'm seeing here. So now we've come. Now we've come, everybody. Yes. Ah, jeez. So now we've come to exactly 107 years later. Nothing has happened in between. We are now in 1935. Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, a descendant of John Bell and a physician by trade, published a book titled The Bell Witch, A Mysterious Spirit, claiming new insights and family records related to the case. He insisted that the spirit had, in fact, returned to communicate with him and a select few. He described dreams, warnings. Bailey's work was seen by some as an extension of the legend, a way to preserve the tale, but others believed he was serious, that the Bell Witch had returned as she promised. Still, no mass haunting was reported that year, no widespread manifestations, just the slow, steady heartbeat of an old tale continuing to echo through the generations. Whether Kate returned or not, the legend had already done its work. It had carved itself into American folklore. And throughout the 20th century, the Bell Witch evolved from a terrifying personal haunting into a national curiosity. Writers, folklorists, and paranormal researchers all weighed in. Some dismissed the story as a hoax, while others compared it to poltergeist phenomena, possession, or even early examples of dissociative mental illness. But for every skeptic, there was someone who had experienced something they couldn't explain. The Bell Witch Cave, located near the original homestead, became a place of pilgrimage. People claimed to hear whispering voices inside, feel cold hands on their shoulders, or be overwhelmed with the sudden nausea and fear. Some said they saw shadows that couldn't have been there. The land itself seemed to hum with a residual energy. Tour guides began offering flashlight tours. Paranormal investigators set up overnight monitoring equipment. EVP specialists recorded static laced with faint voices. Some sounded like a woman singing, others whispering the name Betsy. Local legends grew. It was said that anyone who mocked the Bell Witch or took a rock from the cave would be cursed. Stories poured in from tourists who claimed they'd laughed at the witch only to crash their cars days later or experienced months of bad luck. And yet people kept coming. The Bell Witch was no longer a whisper in the Tennessee woods. She was folklore, she was theater, and she was myth. A mystery and memory combined. What makes the Bell Witch story so uniquely American isn't just its setting or timing, it's how it reflects the anxieties of the new nation. In the early 1800s, America was still young and raw and superstitious. The frontier was full of unknowns. The life that they had there was fragile. Religion was law, and the idea that a ghost or something like it could reach into your home and unravel your entire world, it resonated. Unlike European hauntings, which were often tied to castles, ancient churches, or battlefields, the Bell Witch appeared in a farmhouse, among ordinary people. It didn't need Gothic cathedrals or dungeons, just walls, a floor, and a family. And while most ghost stories fade, this one didn't. It endured because it didn't follow the traditional rules of hauntings. The Bell Witch wasn't a bump in the night. She talked. She argued. She prophesied. She outwitted clergy, frightened generals, and brought an entire town to its knees. She wanted to be known. Even centuries later, that voice still echoed through American ghost lore. In books, on stage, in films like An American Haunting. In the DNA of modern horror, like the Blair Witch Project, whose creators admitted they borrowed from the Bell Witch legend. And in places like Adams, Tennessee, where on moonless nights, visitors still say they hear, just beyond the tree line, disembodied voices, just beneath the earth, whispering. In the century since the Bell Witch first made her presence known in rural Tennessee, people have asked one question more than any other. What was she? Was the Bell Witch a spirit? A soul trapped between this world and the next? A demon hiding behind the mask of familiarity? Or was she something far more human, a product of trauma, superstition, and psychological unraveling? Depending on who you ask, the answers range from a profoundly spiritual to deeply skeptical. What remains constant, however, is the power of the Bell Witch to command belief. Whether as a ghost, a metaphor, or a fraud, her story refuses to fade. So now we're getting into more of the paranormal perspective here. I'm getting phlegmy again, just like last week. I really don't want to start having hiccups again. That would be my luck. That would be my luck. A rough start and then hiccups come right back. Jeez. We'll see what happens here. Just gonna drink this here. See what happens. Paranormal investigators and spiritualists, the Bell Witch is often classified as an intelligent haunting. That is, a spiritual capable of interacting with the living in real time. Unlike residual hauntings, which are more like an echo recording trapped in a space, intelligent hauntings show autonomy, awareness, and intent. From this perspective, the Bell Witch wasn't just reacting, she was planning. She focused her energy on certain individuals. She demonstrated clairvoyance. She could move objects, speak in full sentences, and respond to emotional triggers. She even prophesied her return over a century later. Many modern ghost hunters argue that the Bell Witch may have been a unique fusion of haunting types, part poltergeist, part possession case, and part spirit medium. Some note that Betsy Bell was a child entering puberty, an age often linked with increased poltergeist activity in similar cases. So this is what we were talking about earlier, linking this case to the Enfield poltergeist and the Thornton Heath poltergeist over in the UK. Very, very similar cases. We've got a teenage girl entering puberty, and it seems there is some type of psychic energy happening there, and that I don't know if it just draws spirit energy in or what, but it happens, and it happens a lot. But what makes the Bell Witch exceptional is her voice. No other poltergeist case from the era featured an entity capable of theological debate, multiple personalities, or storytelling. This was a spirit that claimed not just presence, but identity. And according to those believers, the witch may have been a tormented soul, possibly Kate Batts, as the legend suggests, seeking revenge for a perceived injustice, or perhaps it was something far older, masquerading as the spirit of a wronged woman. Many note that the entity's obsession with religious scripture, its hostility toward certain individuals, and its repeated boasts of power as possible signs of demonic origin. Some go further still, suggesting that what the Bells encounters was not one being, but many, a cluster of spirits drawn to the family's energy, manifesting as a singular voice. If true, the Bell Witch would be one of the earliest and most fully realized documented spiritual intelligences in American history. So to say that this case is unique is, you're barely scratching the surface. it's doing things that a lot of spirits don't do. Uh, I think the big thing with this one is that it left the house and it had coherent conversations with people. Debating religion. Geez, could you imagine a ghost in your house debating religion with you? I don't know. I would have been a little more thorough with my personal investigation, taking time to prove that nobody in the room were making the voice. Put a put a gag in everybody's mouth and then wait for it to talk. You see what I'm saying? I don't know. Maybe it's just me. There is another theory, one that places the source of the hauntings not in the air, but in the mind. Skeptics and psychologists have long argued that the Bell Witch phenomena may have been a case of mass hysteria, suggestibility, or even mental illness, particularly on the part of Betsy Bell and John Bell. Now, as we know, I don't like mass hysteria. It's a shit um, explanation for things that happened. I don't like mass hysteria, but this is one of those cases where mass hysteria does kind of um it does kind of answer the questions here. So could it be wrong? Sure, but could it be right? In this particular circumstance, sure, maybe it's right. Um, Mass hysteria, now more often referred to as psychogenic illness, occurs when a group of people believe they are experiencing something supernatural or medical, but the source is psychological. Symptoms spread through social or emotional contagion, especially in isolated communities under stress. In Adams, Tennessee, life was difficult. Religious belief was strong, illness was poorly understood, and a girl suffering from trauma, abuse, or even an undiagnosed neurological condition could easily have been perceived as possession, especially if her suffering seemed to coincide with physical manifestations like knocking, bruises, and strange noises. This theory posits that Betsy may have unconsciously created or reinforced the activity through behavior, voice mimicry, or subconscious manipulation. Some go further, suggesting that Richard Powell, her future husband, and a school teacher with access to psychology texts, may have encouraged or exploited the situation to drive a wedge between her and Joshua Gardner. Others argue that John Bell's illness may have been physical, possibly Bell's palsy. No pun intended there. Ugh. Or epilepsy, another degenerative condition. But that fear surrounding it magnified the idea that he was cursed. Still, the scope and complexity of the manifestations, dozens of witnesses, accurate prophecies, and public displays make this theory difficult to fully prove. If it was a psychological event, it would be one of the most elaborate and effective cases of group belief in American history. There's another theory, less generous, but suggests the entire event was an elaborate hoax. According to this interpretation, the Bell family, or some members within it, may have fabricated the haunting for attention, religious validation, or local influence. In this version of the tale, every noise was staged, every prophecy was vague, every guest was primed to believe. The main evidence for this theory comes from the first major publication on the haunting, an American or an authenticated history of the Bell Witch, written by Martin Van Buren Ingram in 1894. More than 70 years after the events occurred, Ingram claimed to base his accounts on a lost diary written by Richard Williams Bell, John's son. but no one has ever seen that diary. Skeptics point out that Ingram's narrative is often sensationalized, filled with speeches, dialogues, and elaborate descriptions that resemble Gothic fiction more than historical testimony. The lack of primary source documentation from the time, no court records, no death certificates citing the witch, no letters from the neighbors, further cast doubts. And yet, folklorists caution against dismissing such stories entirely. They argue that the legend has grown from kernels of truth, that whether or not every event happened as described, the community believed it did. And in the realm of folklore, belief is power. The Bell Witch contains all the hallmarks of American folklore: a rural setting, a moral conflict, religious overtones, and even an ever-changing narrator. It warns of arrogance, greed, spiritual vulnerability, and the danger of silencing women, whether ghostly or not. If it's folklore, it's masterfully enduring, a living myth. So what makes the Bell Witch so compelling is how it prefigures and overlaps with many hauntings and possession cases that would come later. The Enfield poltergeist in 1977 London involved two young sisters tormented by invisible forces, including disembodied voices and physical attacks. Skeptics claim the girls faked the events. Believers pointed to audio recordings, eyewitnesses, and sheer terror the girls exhibited. I do believe on this podcast we agreed that the Enfield poltergeist wasn't true. It was a fabrication from the children. The pictures don't lie. I'm sorry, but I'm going to go with photo and video evidence over testimony any day. And then in the 1980s, there was the Smurl haunting in Pennsylvania, also involved an entity that communicated, moved objects, and physically attacked the family. It too was associated with religious iconography, and the family was eventually assisted by Ed and Lorraine Warren. And in Amityville, the infamous house where Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his family in 1974, the next residents claimed to hear voices, experienced attacks, and felt cold drafts just like the Bells. Each of these cases mirror elements of the Bell Witch: a central family and a traumatized child, conflicting reports, and a lingering voice that challenges beliefs. The Bell Witch may have been the prototype, America's first full-spectrum haunting, a blueprint for all the stories that came after. So why does it endure? That's the question. That's one of the major questions tonight. And in the end, the Bell Witch persists because it leaves room for everyone. For believers, she is a terrifying example of what happens when the spiritual world collides with the living. For skeptics, she is a case study in social psychology, trauma, and folklore. For storytellers, she is the perfect ghost, articulate, cruel, mysterious, and unforgettable. But maybe her most unsettling trait is this: she never needed a pure form. No shadow in the hallway, no woman in white, just a voice. And that voice said things no one else should have known. Whispered truths that people were too afraid to speak, and waited in the dark until you were alone, just to let you know that she was still there. Even now, more than 200 years later, visitors to Adams, Tennessee report strange experiences. Cold spots near the Bell Cemetery, echoes in the Bell Witch Cave, sudden nausea, disorientation, and always at the center of it, a voice. A faint, feminine, watching voice. Waiting. There are places in the world where silence doesn't feel empty, it feels crowded. Where the air buzzes not with sound, but with presence. Adams, Tennessee is one of those places. Visit on a fog, heavy morning, and you'll see the landscape hasn't changed much. Rolling hills, dense woods, the slow, lazy curve of the Red River. There's a quiet beauty to it, a stillness that almost feels sacred. But listen long enough, and something else begins to settle in. It isn't the birds, it isn't the breeze, it's the feeling that someone's watching. So this next part is a part that I wanted to really add in. It's about the Bell Witch Cave because it seems a little odd to me that we had a haunting on the property, and then all of a sudden, boom, we've got the Bell Witch Cave. Everybody wants to go to the Bell Witch Cave, and why all of a sudden this cave out of nowhere becomes the focal point of this haunting? The modern center of the Bell Witch mysteries today is a place known as the Bell Witch Cave, a small 490-foot long cavern located near the original Bell homestead. Over the past several decades, it's become a pilgrimage site for paranormal enthusiasts, thrill seekers, and the simply curious. Visitors report strange phenomena. Flashlights die without warning, phones glitch, cold air moves against your skin, even when the cave is sealed. Some hear faint laughter, others swear they see shadows where no light exists. Tour guides have collected stories, voices that whisper directly into people's ears, stones that move on their own, and one case where a guest allegedly collapsed after seeing a pale woman standing at the cave's mouth, who vanished when others turned to look. And then, of course, there's the curse. Legends say that removing a rock from the cave brings bad luck, and over the years, dozens of visitors have mailed rocks back to Adams, sometimes weeks, sometimes months later, along with handwritten letters begging for forgiveness. One letter reads, quote, "Please take it back. Since I took this, I lost my job, my marriage fell apart, and my house burned down. I didn't believe in your witch. I do now." End quote. The rock was returned. The Bell Witch has inspired countless books, plays, and documentaries, and has been the subject of novels, history texts, and even academic studies on folklore. Her name has become shorthand for hauntings that cross the line from passive to violent. But her most famous cultural echo came in 1999 when a small indie horror film called The Blair Witch Project exploded onto the scene. Though the film never explicitly names the Bell Witch, the creators have admitted that they were inspired by the Tennessee legend, the idea of a rural, unseen presence tormenting its victims, one that speaks through fear rather than form. The film's viral marketing, handheld camera style, and ambiguous ending echoed the Bell Witch's greatest weapon, uncertainty. The 2005 movie An American Haunting, starring Donald Sutherland and Sissy Spacek, told a fictionalized version of the Bell Witch story, focusing heavily on trauma and possession. Critics were divided, but the film introduced the legend to a new generation. From YouTube to paranormal TikToks, the Bell Witch has taken on a digital afterlife, and she's gone viral again. So what makes the Bell Witch case so persistently haunting is that no one ever solved it. There was no exorcism, no great revelation, no final clear truth. She arrived, she tormented, she promised to return, and then she left. There's something deeply unsettling about that. In most ghost stories, there's closure. A body found, a curse broken, a house cleansed. But the Bell Witch left behind a silence that feels unfinished. And that silence in many ways is more frightening than screams. She forced people to question their faith, their sanity, and their religion. And she did it not with apparitions, but with words, with insight, with malice disguised as familiarity. It's the kind of terror you can't see coming, and maybe the kind that never really leaves. So before we get to our closing, do need to take a quick bathroom break, and we're gonna close it out and see what we think. So hold right there, folks. I'll be right back. Hey, I returned. Hello. No hiccups today. No hiccups today. So this episode is going to be a little short. That's okay. I did kind of rush through things tonight because we had a late start, and I do have to keep a schedule here. But so we have one person watching. Hello, thank you for sticking around tonight. I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Or not subscribe, but follow the channel. We lost one follower tonight. But we have a case to get through here. And let's break it down. So, oh, there it is. So, there's your have a drink. We've heard most of the entertaining evidence behind the story. There's a few things I've left out, and it just gets a little fantastical from there. But I feel like my brain initially tells me that this isn't a traditional haunting, that this isn't real. This feels more like what we have consistently seen, where a young preteen girl may have inadvertently displayed some type of psychic energy, and it manifests itself in the house. And this just might be like an early rendition of that. Um, it was mentioned a little bit ago that this was the first tale uh, in American history that talked about, like a young girl being the focus of demonic or poltergeist activity. This story kind of set the bar for that. And I can't help but feel like maybe, just maybe, this is a group of people that are just bored on a farm in rural Tennessee that that just wanted some attention. Let's look and see if we can find Adams, Tennessee. Let me switch scenes. Okay, so this is Adams, Tennessee. It is in the middle of nowhere. I may have actually drove by this when I was on my way here to the East Coast. Oh, look. Bell's Chapel Church, Bell Witch Cave. So I would be willing to wager that. Oh, look at that. John Bell Sr.'s grave. Oh, there's no pictures of it. Boo. Well, let's look at the cave. Let's look at pictures of the cave. I mean, it's a cool cave. It really seems like they're pushing. Ah, jeez, come on. Gift shop. Jeez. Yeah, it's a cave. I mean, so I used to be a tour guide at a cave. This is kind of what you come to see at caves, especially in the South. What you're dealing with is like a homestead cabin, almost always, and there's a chunk of property, and on that property they find a cave. However, let me say that generally, the homesteads are built on this type of property because these cave systems hold water, and you need water to survive. And in the early 1800s, if you built a homestead on a piece of property and you find water underneath, you're going to want to stay there. So finding a cave this close to an old, 1800s homestead doesn't seem so far-fetched to me. I wonder if that's the cabin, the actual cabin. It doesn't really say. Yeah, it's a little weird because this looks like new construction to me. I mean, uh, uh, the cave that I worked at, there was an old cabin on the property, and it was very small. We're talking like smaller than my office here, the entire building. And it was nowhere near as in good condition as this is. I mean, metal roof and everything. It almost feels like they built this cabin here just to say this is the old John Bell, or this is the old Bell homestead. Or maybe they built it on top of what used to be the old homestead. Oh, look, there's his headstone. Cool. Yeah, it's a shame that they got to put it behind iron bars like that. Oh, look at that. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, it's just, I'm not seeing anything that's really like making me go, oh, nuts, right? Um, I almost feel like that this is more like a teenage girl just having her fun on a homestead in the early 1800s that was bored. Uh, we have seen, or I have seen several cases where we have chose not to investigate because there was so much evidence to prove that it was the girl throwing her voice, or she had learned to throw her voice in some form or another. And she had convinced everybody it was a ghost, but later on she had said, oh, yes, it was me. This thing runs very parallel to those kinds of stories. And, you know, the only thing that really gave me pause was the preacher, how he had confessed some sins, and then upon entering the home, um, those sins were announced. However, I was a teenage child once, and I used to eavesdrop on people. So, you know, I could see, you know, this attention starved, bored 12, 14, 15-year-old girl running around town and eavesdropping on people confessing at church, right? Yeah, that doesn't seem so far-fetched, right? um, I can't help but think that maybe she, you know, let's sneak around, let's find some juicy secrets, and I'm going to use that to convince people that what I'm doing here is real. It's not so far-fetched. And unfortunately, you know, that's where my brain is kind of leaning. Um, and I'm going to say, because everything that the voice said it was going to do came to be kind of accurate. Except for coming back after 107 years. It was a weird number, right? It's kind of like a guarantee, you know, after 107 years, you know, the girl's not going to be there anymore. So, you know, it's either going to do its thing or it's not, right? So, I think it was a crapshoot on the part of the little girl that she's like, well, I could try and see what happens, and maybe by then the story had taken root. I feel like maybe we were dealing with a young girl that was probably a little too smart for her own good, and came up with this, and that's why we never really seen anything. You know, it could have been something have to do with abuse from her father, which is why her father, um, her and her father seemed to be the main targets. Sure, it's easy to manifest being slapped, yeah, I slap myself and start screaming, and then everybody runs in the room, and you see a handprint. I don't know where it came from. Easy. It's easily done. Uh, the illness brought on by the man could have or by the dad, John Bell, could have very easily been a smattering of many different illnesses in the early 1800s. Um, and I hate to be that guy, but it could have been all of these things this girl was doing, and that caused mass hysteria. I know I don't like mass hysteria, but I think we're just dealing with a girl who is too smart for her own good, and it compounded into something fantastical and enduring. I don't see anything that just consistently and vehemently blows my mind. Even like current investigations. Uh, it comes down to, we've got paranormal investigators going into this cave that all of a sudden is important, which seems silly to me. Um, but let's check that first box. When it comes to investigations, we always ask, who's making money off of this? And when it comes down to it, oh, didn't mean to slap the mic. When it comes down to it, it's the only thing in that area is that homestead and that cave. So somebody's making money off of it. So let's just say, hey, we need to wait. The thrill of the Bell homestead is faded. How can we bring people in? Let's say this cave is haunted. Oh, a cave. Everybody loves a cave. Boom. Now you got people coming in, tourist money coming in, all this other stuff. So I'm going to say that this probably is not a genuine case of haunting. Well, yeah, I'm sorry. It's just I'm not seeing enough evidence to convince me. It's just, yeah, there's just not enough here. And I'm sorry. I wish Ayan were here. He would help me. I think he would kind of be on the same page as me. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. So I'm sorry. There's just not enough here tonight to say that this is a genuine case of any kind of activity. Yeah, I think we're just dealing with a girl who was too smart for her own good. I am sorry. So, that being said, so there we go. I said it again. Drink, please.
Best viewers on streamboo.com. Remove the space.
Remove the space. Wow. Possible ban evader monitoring. Cool. Let's report this person right quick. Well, that person will never chat on this channel again. Yeah, their account is 5 days old. There's no way. Anyway, so yeah, we're dealing with this is not a paranormal case. Unfortunately, this is a case of a frustrated and bored teen. Sorry, not sorry. But that's why we do this. We look objectively at cases and see all of the evidence, and we make up our minds for ourselves. So that's why you're here. That's why you listen. So thank you everybody for listening tonight. That was the case of the Bell Witch. If you watch on Twitch, thank you for watching on Twitch. If you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, thank you for listening. Specifically on YouTube, if you're watching and you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It will help us tremendously. We are working to get our footing. We're in this a year deep, and we don't want to let this thing slide from us. So if you can find it in your heart to mash that subscribe button and follow us, that would be very, 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 very greatly appreciated. we've got a unique story for next week. I don't want to say what it is. That way, next week people will hopefully tune in. Um, that being said, I think we're going to wrap it up. I do have a small closing statement before we leave. I wonder, do we have anybody worth rating on Twitch tonight? Let's find out. We'll raid another podcaster here just to uh just for shits and giggles here because I mean we're only taking one viewer over. So we are going to raid where'd they go? I lost them. Oh. Nope, not gonna raid that guy. Jeez, I was gonna. It's giving me a nice list of other podcasters that are live right now. So many other people do so much better than me. Oh, geez. Let's look at following. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna raid Trash Talk Podcasts. We've rated them a few times now, so give them a follow if you're actually out there watching tonight. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. But we do have one little thing we're gonna say before it's time to go. Oh, let's put up some creepy music. The Bell Witch wasn't just a ghost. She was a mirror reflecting fear, faith, guilt, and everything people were too afraid to say out loud. She wasn't just a haunted house. She was a haunted truth. And maybe that's why her voice still echoes across centuries. Because she never was just a legend. She was a warning that the past is never as quiet as we think. That some stories don't stay buried, and that not all spirits rest in peace. So if you find yourself near the edge of the woods and you hear something whisper your name, don't answer. Don't turn around. And whatever you do, don't bring anything home. Because some shadows don't like being left behind. And no matter what you do, make sure you follow us beyond the shadows. Good night, everybody.
A creature like that, how would it ever die?
And this monster starts running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Oh, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. Horrible. Look like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Beyond the shadows.